these artists hit their stride late in life.
It's the Inspiration Place podcast with artist Miriam Schulman. Welcome to the Inspiration Place podcast, an art world insider podcast for artists by an artist, where each week we go behind the scenes to uncover the perspiration and inspiration behind the art. And now, your host, Miriam Schulman.
Well, hey there, my friend. Welcome to the Inspiration Place. This is Miriam Schulman, your curator of inspiration, and you're listening to episode number 308. I'm so grateful that you're here. So today is a very quiet day in New York City. It's rainy. It's beautiful. The blooms are all out. All the trees are flowering. Daffodils are waning. The tulips, though, are spreading. So it's just magnificent. And it's one of those perfect quiet days that I want to get a lot done. And it's so easy for these days to just slip through my fingers. So what I wanted to spend this episode sharing with you is yesterday I had the opportunity to go to the Whitney Biennial. So the Whitney Biennial happens every other year. It features American art, although not all the artists are born in America. Some are from other places and are working now in America. But it was a very interesting show. And what impressed me the most was there were 5 artists who were all in their 80s. Usually in these biennial type shows, they feature more emerging artists, young artists, and definitely the show had their share of artists born in the 1980s and the 1990s, millennials. But there were 5 artists who are born between 1941 and 1944. And I absolutely loved the work of some of these artists. So I wanted to spend this podcast episode sharing with you what inspired me and why, and also perhaps share some ideas you can incorporate into your own art, as well as the inspiration of, or the motivation rather, of how these artists hit their stride late in life. But before we get there, these words.
And now, let's hear from artist Jan Lewis about what she thought of the book Artpreneur.
The book is such a compilation of information that touches on so many areas of the professional artist's life. And I think that's what I love about it. Just overall, it's just that you just did such an amazing job of pulling together from psychology and emotion and marketing and our thought life and how we think about ourselves. So there is so much to do in it that I have not even had time to delve into yet, that I'm really excited to just kind of have my own journal, my own Artpreneur book. That is where I write all of my thoughts and all of the places where I need to challenge myself in my own thinking and work. And so I'm excited to do that. But thank you for walking through the trials of writing the book, because it definitely is going to impact a lot of people.
Thanks, Jan. You can order Artpreneur from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever books are sold. To get your bonus package, go to artpreneurbook.com. And now, let's get back to the Inspiration Place.
So one artist that I'm just so excited to talk about right away is Suzanne Jackson. She was born in St. Louis, but she was raised in the Yukon Territory. In other words, she was raised in Alaska before Alaska was even a state. And she's very accomplished, very much a multi-passionate or multi-potentiate. I think that's what they sometimes call it, but multi-passionate person. She traveled as a dancer. She was a gallery owner. She did many things in her life. She owned a gallery in, I believe it was California. And she was a single mother in her 40s. And around that time, she earned her MFA in theater design from Yale University. I believe that was in the 1990s because now she's in her 80s. So then after earning her MFA, I don't know if this was a direct path, but she went to teach at Savannah College of Art, which is a very well-known art college in the South. And she lives in the Starland district of Savannah, which is a historic district, very artsy. She has a home built in the 1890s. She's on 3 different lots. And she says in the interview how people are always wanting to buy her house and she's not parting with it. She loves her house. But in her backyard, there's fruit trees, there's turtles, there's possums, there's other wildlife. Now, as I mentioned before, many of these artists, they didn't hit their stride till later in life. So when she was 75, so this is in 2019, she got a very prestigious Joan Mitchell grant. And the type of art that she's been focusing on the last 5 years and the art that is included in the Whitney Biennial is truly exquisite. And I've never seen anything like this before. And I think you will find it inspiring as well. I'm going to describe it to you so you can understand what it is that she did without even going to look at it. But I do hope that you will go on the Googles and look up Suzanne Jackson's art and see what it is that I'm talking about. So she paints with acrylic paint and she doesn't use canvas. What she does is she puts plastic on the table and she paints directly onto the plastic. And then when it dries, she peels it off. Now, any of you who have worked in acrylic paint and you've made a palette, you know how when the acrylic paint dries, it's actually quite fun to peel it off the palette and you have these beautiful peel layers. Well, what Suzanne does, what Jackson does, is she does the whole painting by letting those layers all dry and peels the whole thing off together. She also incorporates sometimes found in Therma. She also, when she's cleaning the paint off her hands, she'll save all of the dried paint and she'll put that into her canvas as well. I don't mean canvas because there's no canvas, into her artwork as well. The way that these art objects, so it really blends between sculpture and painting because it is paint, but then it has a 3-dimensional form. They're hung up from the ceiling, they're hung on the walls, and they almost look like animal hides, the way they hang it up. They also have a very delicate appearance because they're transparent. They have an organic appearance because they look kind of like amoebas might under a microscope. Really amazing. So I wanted to share that with you because of her story is so interesting, but also because the art was so interesting. And perhaps you might want to try putting plastic down on your work table and painting directly on the plastic and seeing what you come up with.
And now, let's hear from artist Sherry Garvin about what she thought of the book Artpreneur.
My name is Sherry, and I first purchased the audiobook, and then partway through that realized I wanted something to write in, and I wanted to be able to reread and look at the physical print, and went out and bought the book. So Artpreneur by Miriam Schulman, I absolutely would recommend it. As a longtime artist, I've been selling my work word of mouth, and I just wanted to take it a little bit higher. So I've been reading various books, and this one resonated so much so that I'm now in her coaching program because what she's teaching with mindset and marketing and how to do it as an artist, she's an artist. She knows what we fight with. And so it was perfect. So I'm in it. I love it. I'd recommend it.
Thanks, Sherry. You can order Artpreneur from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever books are sold. To get your bonus package, go to artpreneurbook.com. If you're interested in getting coached by Miriam, go to schulmanart.com/BIZ to learn more about the Artist Incubator and other coaching options. And now, let's get back to the inspiration place.
Next, I want to share artist Mary Kelly. So Kelly is an artist who first came to prominence in the 1970s with a very conceptual point of view and political point of view. She was known as a socialist who tried to unionize artists alongside factory workers. And she was a boundary pusher who brought feminism to the realm of conceptual art. One of her most radical aspects of her art, especially in her early years, was her insistence that maternity and domesticity were worthy subjects of serious creative expression. Most conceptual artists were focused on violence and transgression. Kelly's work was very understated, very intimate, definitely emphasized motherhood, pregnancy, reproductive sexuality. But I want to share with you the art that I experienced inside the gallery, which led me and my friend came with me, who's not an artist, not an art historian. The two of us found ourselves getting emotional in front of her artwork. So I'm going to describe it to you what she did. She had 10 years of her life represented as calendars. So she had the 12 months behind plexiglass, and she had 10 years worth. She wanted you to experience in a continuum of these 10 years. And what she did was you could see that she had marked her birthdays every year with the number 75, 76, 77. And I believe she's in her 80s now. All right, let me share a little more about what art critics have said about this work. So they describe it as being collages, and what they are personal calendars. She drew on the calendars in ash on vellum, and ash is kind of, think about somebody being cremated, or we turn to dust or ash. So it's very much a commentary on the aging process. I already mentioned that her age was juxtaposed on the calendars, as well as whenever one of her friends died. And when a friend died who was younger than her, she always looked at it like she cheated death by the number of years that she lived beyond her younger friend. And whenever somebody passed older than her, she would look at it as how many years she might have left. So this is what really created this emotional drama for me and my friend. And my friend did just lose her mother in her 80s. So that was part of it as well. But even I not having a immediate loss in my own life, I felt that emotion of this piece as well. So the work evokes this sense of loss that definitely shapes people late in life. I know my mother is going through this as well, as she has friends who are no longer in her life. I can't remember if she's had a friend pass away yet, but she has one who's in a nursing home, another one who's in hospice. So it is present. Her husband, who's quite a bit older than her, has had some of his friends pass away. This series that she created is part of an extended project that Kelly has worked on, which has this autobiographical narrative feel to it. In addition to just having the dates on the calendar, these are her actual calendar. So you do see like doctor's appointments and phone numbers and all the things that kind of make up that life. And the way she's drawn on it, it really has this feeling of time slipping away. This is not the first time Kelly has been in a biennial. She was also included in 1991 and 2004. So this is, I guess, her third time being here. And her art is represented in numerous public collections, including the Tate Modern, the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum, the Hammer Museum, as well as museums in Stockholm, Los Angeles, Chicago, Her art is in the collection of the New Museum in New York, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and many others. I'm not going to list all of them because then it starts to get boring. But it's definitely an impressive resume. Some of the calendars are so abstract that you can't even tell it's a calendar anymore, except you might see like March 2019 on it. And just I want you to note that in this calendar, I think she was 74, and this art represents 10 years of her life. So she's in her 80s now. It's quite amazing. She's still working and still relevant.
I've been in the artist incubator. I've noticed that the type of people and the quality of people that have become my followers and then subscribers and then collectors, that has elevated. The shift had started to happen in terms of thinking of my art as this little thing or this little hobby, to stop using words like little and just and saying, this is my business. This is what I'm doing. That I was hesitant to go large. I'm not hesitant anymore. I feel like I've had so much growth. And I think the thing is that I didn't even think that I needed that. It's funny because I knew what I wanted the end goal to be, but I didn't realize that I didn't have a middle. Like there was no story in the middle of how to get there. And I think what the Artist Incubator has given me is like just the tools, the support, the encouragement, the real-time talk to get there. I'm so incredibly thankful that I chose to do it because I didn't think there was anything wrong. You know, I don't feel like I have that fear behind, oh my gosh, what are they going to think about the pricing? Now I'm like, yeah, exactly. This is what it costs. Look at it, you know?
The third artist in her 80s, I guess these are all women in their 80s that I want to share with you, is Mary Lovelace O'Neill. She was born in 1942 in Jackson, Mississippi, I think, and then lived in Oakland, California, and Mexico. So what I found very striking about this artwork, first of all, I just loved it because it was one of the first pieces that we saw that wasn't quite so conceptual. The other art that I'm talking about, I think I actually saw that later. So I'm actually describing art that in reverse order of when I experienced them. Mary Kelly's work was actually the last artist that I looked at, whereas this one was probably the first art that I looked at that was less conceptual and more had the feeling of a traditional painter. Sometimes art is very interesting to me if it's conceptual, but sometimes I get a little bit annoyed if the art needs such a long explanation for you to finally understand what the heck it is you're looking at and why. So I appreciated Mary Lovelace O'Neill's work because it was a type of art that kind of hits you on a visceral level without needing the explanation. So one thing that I think is very interesting about her, so she is another woman of color, as is Suzanne Jackson. So both of those two women are living artists, and they're both women of color. And they're both currently creating artwork that is not a direct commentary on their experience of being a Black woman artist. And Mary Lovelace O'Neill's point of view is she felt she didn't have to because just the fact that she's creating very large artwork. In fact, I wonder if they have the size here. I'm not seeing the size. I took a photograph of the wall plaque. It doesn't have the size on here. But these artworks are tremendous, tremendously large. So you imagine taking up a full wall in the Whitney. Like, this is not a small artwork. And what the curator was very quick to point out that just her being an artist who is a Black woman who is taking up space with large artworks, she felt that was enough of a political statement without having to be so literal. Because lots of artists of color, they do make art that's more figurative, that says more about their identity. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. but she's one who isn't doing that. And yet she is still doing something that's very radical, she says, and I agree with her, by creating these very large artworks. Women in general, as you may remember my talking about in Artpreneur, are generally afraid to take up space. You know, it's funny because sometimes I talk about the trolls and the people who hate on me, and more than one people had said that I was a man hater, which isn't true, but I guess they just feel that anyone who talks about feminism is a man hater. I really can't figure it out. So I don't know. You email me or you comment under the blog or DM me on Instagram or comment on Instagram and let me know what your thoughts are. If you had the impression that I was a man hater from reading my book, I talk about the socialization of women, and I don't even use the word patriarchy though until the end of the book. And the patriarchy, it's used in the book, but it doesn't even come in except for the fact that I'm saying, oh, this writer who wrote this book on the patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. And that's how it's used. So it's very funny. To me, it's very funny when people say she's a man hater and she's so miserable and blah, 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 because it's not really true. So I don't know what it is that triggers them about my book specifically, why they come away with that feeling. So, but yeah, I do comment on how women are socialized not to take up space, not to claim power. We're taught to be small, and that's wrong for us to desire money. So anyway, I digress. Let's talk about this artist. The wall plaque that I took a picture of actually talks about her art, Blue Whale, aka number 12, which is from the Whales Effing series. And by effing, it doesn't say the word E-F-F-I-N-G. It says F-U-C blah, 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 I-N-G. Okay. So that's her words, not mine. And it is a beautiful, large abstract. A lot of power, very dynamic, very outrageous point of view. Really, really interesting. So that artwork was really good. The other artwork I saw looks like somebody on a cross. It has lots of drips. It definitely has that abstract quality to it. If I were to guess, I would say that the canvas is at least 7 feet high and maybe 20 feet long. And then she has another artwork on the opposite wall that is actually 4 canvases. So 4 times that size, maybe 30 feet long. Let me see if I actually took another picture of the other wall plaque just so I can give you more information here. No, didn't do it. Okay, so I looked up Mary Lovelace O'Neill to give you a little more background on this artist. So she's done painting, drawing, printmaking. She went to Howard University and she studied closely with David Driscoll as well as other artists. I'm not familiar with the artists she studied with. And she was also a graduate student at Columbia. She came to prominence in the late 1960s. She was active with the Black Arts Movement, working alongside artists and writers. I'm not familiar with the names of the artists that she and the writers she worked alongside with, but that doesn't mean that they weren't famous. I'm just not very familiar with this movement in art history. In the 1980s, she joined Robert Blackburn's New York printmaking workshop, and she also was part of a communal print workshop in Santiago in Chile. She's already had solo exhibitions at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. She's had exhibitions in Paris. She's had exhibitions at the Mississippi Museum of Art, where she's from, in Jackson, Mississippi. And she's won some prestigious art awards. So overall, I really enjoyed the Whitney's Biennial. You definitely got a sense going through all the different objects and artworks. And there was also video installations going through everything. You can definitely see that there was an agenda, not that there was anything wrong with it, that the curators had. There were 71 artists chosen collectively to interpret what's going on in our culture, and they had stories to tell. Each of these artworks sparks discussion. They comment on issues across all different mediums and disciplines. And this is the 81st biennial, and it will be up until August 11th. So if you have the opportunity to visit New York between now and then, I highly recommend that you go and visit the Whitney. It's an amazing museum. And don't forget to go down the street. There's this beautiful French coffee shop where you can get the best croissants and hot chocolate in the city on beautiful blue china. All right, my friend. So that's it for now. I hope that you found the stories of these three artists as inspiring as I found them to be. And make sure that you try to look at their artwork. We will put some photos on my website. This is episode 308. So you can find the photos of these artists at schulmanart.com/308. All right, my friend. So I will see you same time, same place next week. Until then, stay inspired.
Thank you for listening to the Inspiration Place podcast. Connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/SchulmanArt, on Instagram @SchulmanArt, and of course on schulmanart.com.